begins quietly, the way most strange stories do, without sirens, without spectacle, only a whisper through the dark frequencies of space. A thin thread of light slides across the black between planets, soft as breath. Astronomers call it 3I Atlas, the third known visitor from beyond our solar system. To them, it is a data set, a trajectory, a brightness curve that must be plotted, logged, compared. But to others, it is something older than science, something that hums with intention. It moves with a grace that feels deliberate, almost shy, and as it slips behind the sun, the world begins to imagine. When NASA's channels fell silent, coinciding, perhaps by accident, with a government shutdown, the chatter online turned from curiosity to wonder. For several days, the agency's social feeds paused. No updates, no telemetry, no images, just the absence of sound, which in this age feels louder than noise. And in that silence, humanity did what it has always done. It began to dream. Some said it was just a comet, an interstellar pebble tracing a lonely arc through gravity's corridors. Others called it a signal, a disguised visitor, a messenger, built to look unremarkable until the right eyes looked closer. Most of us didn't call it anything at all. We just felt a tremor, a small pull of the imagination, a sense that something out there was watching with equal calm. Astronomy, in its essence, is listening to ancient light. Every telescope is a kind of memory machine, gathering whispers from years, centuries, or millennia ago. But 3I Atlas carries a newer story, a message still traveling. Its light left only a short while ago, perhaps when humans were already holding cameras up to the night sky. We are, in a sense, catching its breath in real time. And what we find in that breath depends on what part of ourselves we listen with. Behind the data, the mind builds patterns. The object brightens when it shouldn't. It drifts in a way that defies easy modeling. Spectrometers reveal nickel where there should be ice, silence where there should be dust. It's easy to call this anomaly. Easier still, to call it design. There's something soothing about the idea that randomness has purpose, that the universe arranges itself not by accident, but by hidden intention. Yet the calm voice of science reminds us, anomalies are how nature teaches us humility. What we do not understand is not always what we imagine. Still, we imagine. The story of 3I Atlas lives in that tension between instrument and intuition. Telescopes collect photons. Consciousness collects possibility. Some people, quiet ones who train the mind as others train muscles, claim to reach across that distance without machinery. They call it remote viewing, perception without sight, attention that extends beyond the skin. Once, it was a classified experiment at Stanford, paid for by the government's curiosity about the unseen. For 20 years, under names that now sound like myth, these studies tried to test what intuition might touch. Submarines, documents, coordinates, things hidden, yet described by minds in quiet rooms. When the data came back, it refused to behave. Too successful to dismiss, too unpredictable to prove. The programs ended, but the practice never vanished. It sank underground, into small collectives of dreamers and disciplined psychics, people who think of the mind as another kind of antenna. And when 3I Atlas appeared, those antennae turned toward the stars. The groups gave it a number, not a name. Numbers are neutral, they said. Numbers carry less bias. The target cue. Describe the nature and origin of the object designated 3I Atlas. 6 minds, separated by geography, met the task in isolation. No images, no hints, only coordinates and quiet. What returned, according to their notes, was not a comet. It was something alive. or something pretending to be. They wrote of shapes that were both geometric and organic, surfaces that shimmered as if aware of being observed. Some described interiors that curved like cathedral domes, walls pulsing with slow energy, chambers lined with what felt like light instead of matter. Others sensed stillness, like a dormant system waiting for a key. One wrote, "It's not sleeping, it's remembering." Skeptics call this coincidence. In imagination, people often share the same vocabulary. Our stories of alien craft have long been carved by the same collective myths: metallic hulls, luminous corridors, beings suspended in time. These are the archetypes we inherit, not proof but pattern. Yet what gives pause is the consistency, the way independent minds sketched hexagonal seams glowing white and green, the way each described motionless intelligence within. Perhaps they drew from the same cultural reservoir, or perhaps they dipped their brushes into something subtler, the undercurrent of the cosmos that touches thought. Remote viewing has always walked that border between science and dream. Physicists call it impossible. Statisticians call it improbable. But somewhere between those words lives the mystery of consciousness itself. If thought can influence matter, if observation can alter particles, why not the reverse? Maybe space, too, observes us. Maybe 3i Atlas is not only object but observer, a mirror drifting through vacuum to remind us how little we know about knowing. The viewers spoke, too, of awareness. As they reached toward the object, they felt a tension reaching back. Not hostility, not curiosity, something gentler, distant, like the way a whale might notice a diver through water, acknowledging, indifferent, ancient. They said the object did not hide from perception but absorbed it, like light entering glass. They felt seen and found it strangely comforting. In the language of physics, observation collapses possibilities into fact. In the language of imagination, observation multiplies possibilities instead. What did these people touch? An alien structure or their own reflection? We cannot say. But their descriptions ripple through discussion boards, research forums, late-night podcasts, each retelling softer than the last, less about revelation, more about wonder. Meanwhile, scientists continue their work. They speak of trajectory, gravity, orbital mechanics. They describe how radiation pressure might cause the object to shift course without engines, how sublimation of metals could mimic controlled thrust. Each explanation peels back the mystery layer by layer, yet some layers resist. 3i Atlas keeps behaving like a riddle, simple in motion, complex in intent. Somewhere between those two languages, the mathematical and the mystical, lies the tone of this moment. It is neither hysteria nor proof, but quiet speculation, the kind that keeps you awake in gentle thought. What if the universe is not a cold expanse but a conversation, and every comet a syllable in that long dialogue between stars and minds? What if 3i Atlas is saying something, not to our ears but to our awareness? We live in an age of endless exposure. Satellites map our cities, algorithms predict our moods, data streams faster than dreams. Yet in that flood of information, mystery has grown rare. 3i Atlas gives it back. Its path, its silence, its odd chemistry. They are small reminders that not everything is illuminated, that even in an age of surveillance, the cosmos still holds secrets too vast for our equations. And perhaps that is why this story matters. Not because we need aliens to make the universe interesting, but because the unknown keeps our minds alive. It asks us to look up instead of inward, and yet in looking up, we end up finding the inward anyway. When I think of 3i Atlas, I think of a traveller that has been moving longer than our species has existed. I think of light leaving its surface before humans learn to speak. Maybe it has crossed regions where stars are born and die, where gravity weaves galaxies like silk. Maybe what it carries is not passengers or technology, but memory, compressed in nickel, encrypted in dust. And now it passes through our sky, brushing our senses, stirring our imagination, whispering, "Remember that you are part of the story too." Behind every theory, government secrets, alien origin, cosmic artifact, there is a deeper truth. Curiosity is contagious. We build our own conspiracies out of longing. We want there to be a reason the world is strange. We want to believe that someone, somewhere, understands the pattern. And so the myth of hidden knowledge persists, not as deception but as comfort. It suggests that chaos is not chaos at all, merely mystery waiting for translation. NASA's silence, whether bureaucratic or intentional, became part of that myth. When the screens went dark, people filled the gap with imagination. Some whispered that the agency had seen something impossible. Others thought the object had shifted course. The most poetic idea was that 3i Atlas itself caused the silence, a pause in communication as it aligned with the sun, a celestial eclipse of information. Of course, none of this can be verified, but that is the nature of this gentle conspiracy. It does not demand belief, only attention. It asks you to sit with uncertainty as though it were music, to listen not for answers but for rhythm. The truth might be that 3i Atlas is a perfectly ordinary rock on a perfectly extraordinary journey. Yet in imagining otherwise, we remember that the universe still contains room for wonder. If you trace its path through simulation, you'll see how elegantly it threads the solar system, almost as if guided. It brushes past Mars, skims near Jupiter's orbit, and glides behind the Sun, where observation becomes impossible. When it emerges again, months later, astronomers expect to find it dimmer, fragmented perhaps, but part of us hopes it will shine brighter, as though responding to our collective gaze. Hope is, after all, another kind of propulsion. And while we wait, the stories accumulate. The remote viewers continue their sessions, their sketches growing intricate. Spirals, lattices, patterns that echo molecular diagrams. Psychologists study their descriptions, noting correlations with archetypal imagery, with deep subconscious symmetries. Some call it coincidence, others call it resonance. I prefer to call it dialogue, the universe speaking through imagination, filtered by mind. Every civilization tells stories of visitors. The Greeks called them gods, descending on chariots of light. The Mayans carved them as feathered serpents falling from stars. The modern world calls them craft, probes, phenomena. But perhaps the visitor has always been the same, a reflection of our yearning projected onto the heavens. 3i Atlas just happens to be the newest mirror. In that sense, the object's origin matters less than its effect. It makes scientists cautious, skeptics curious, dreamers serene. It unites opposites, fact and faith, machine and mind. It reminds us that every discovery begins with a question whispered into darkness, and that sometimes the darkness whispers back. There's a quiet comfort in that thought. In the endless cold between suns, something drifts that may never know we exist, yet still manages to alter our perception of existence. It doesn't need to be a ship. It doesn't need to be alive. Its gift is subtler. It teaches us how to wonder without panic, how to stand beneath infinity, and feel peace instead of fear. So tonight, if you look up and find a point of light that wasn't there before, imagine its three-eye atlas, moving through the deep with patient purpose. Don't ask what it wants. Don't rush to solve it. Just breathe. And remember that for the first time in a long while, something in the universe has made us pause. Not because we're afraid, but because we're listening. And maybe that's all the message ever was. When the first clear images of Three-Eye Atlas began to circulate among astronomers, something in the data didn't add up. It was supposed to be simple. A comet, a frozen traveler wandering through the void, releasing vapor as it neared the warmth of our sun. But instead of the familiar signature of ice and dust, the sensors found metals, nickel pure enough to raise questions. And then there was the brightness, flickering, not with the rhythm of rotation, but as if pulsing from within. Scientists wrote papers, revised models, adjusted their equations to fit what they saw. Yet with every explanation came a new discrepancy, as if the object were rewriting its own story while they tried to read it. When something behaves just outside the laws we know, we start to sense the boundary of our understanding. It's not that the laws are wrong, only that they're incomplete. Atlas became a quiet challenge to certainty. Its surface shimmered like polished stone, but responded to sunlight like metal. Its tail, expected to stretch like a veil of vapor, barely existed at all. The telescopes watched as it shed material in all directions, yet continued along its precise course. No spin, no visible propulsion, no chaos, only grace. Some nights, when the observatories released their datasets, the patterns looked almost deliberate. The bursts of light came at intervals too even to be random, separated by identical durations, like a signal counting seconds across interstellar space. Scientists called it coincidence, the rhythm of physics mistaken for language. But deep down, a few wondered, because coincidence, after all, is only a name we give to order we don't yet understand. It was not the first time the cosmos played tricks like this. Oumuamua had done the same years earlier. Its elongated shape, its silent acceleration, its strange albedo all defying classification. It had come and gone before humanity could even decide what it was. Three-Eye Atlas, though, seemed more patient. It lingered, offering itself to observation, as if inviting the gaze of our instruments. Its behavior was strange, but not hostile. It seemed to be showing us something, just not saying what. Observers began to compare the object's trajectory to planetary orbits, and noticed a peculiar harmony. Its path did not crash through our system, but threaded between worlds as if navigating lanes invisible to us. At each crossing, gravitational forces could have shifted it, yet the object adjusted subtly, maintaining balance. To the untrained eye, it was simply physics, but to those who looked longer, it felt more like choreography. And the idea began to form that perhaps we were not watching a rock at all, but a performance, a demonstration of precision on a cosmic scale. What made it more unsettling was the texture of its light. Through high-resolution imaging, astronomers detected glints that changed color, as if responding to oxygen or temperature. White to green, then back again, as though something within reacted to contact with the solar wind. Some suggested metallic oxidation, others speculated on photonic resonance, and a few, quietly, wondered if it was communication. Light is, after all, the oldest language in the universe. Maybe this flicker was not the artifact of chemistry, but intention. A slow-motion signal written in color instead of sound. Meanwhile, Instruments on Earth caught whispers of radio static near the same frequencies the object was passing through. Background noise, perhaps, from solar interference or equipment drift. Yet within that static, there were repeating tones, barely perceptible, faint like echoes from another room. They didn't match known cosmic sources, and they faded as quickly as they appeared. To most scientists, it was irrelevant noise. To a few others, it was the kind of anomaly that stirs imagination. If you stare at something long enough, your mind begins to shape it into meaning. That's what the skeptics said. But what if meaning isn't illusion? What if attention itself is the key that unlocks whatever lies hidden in plain sight? Some philosophers of science have argued that observation isn't passive, it's participatory. To see is to touch, however lightly, and perhaps 3i Atlas, in its quiet passage, was responding to being seen. The idea sounds mystical, but physics brushes against it more often than people think. The quantum world doesn't behave until it's watched. Light behaves like a particle only when measured as one. Maybe the cosmos operates on the same principle, awareness as part of the equation. So when humanity points 1,000 telescopes at a single traveler, when millions of minds wonder at once about the same object, perhaps the universe listens. Perhaps 3i Atlas was never emitting light randomly at all. Perhaps it was reflecting curiosity. And yet, curiosity has its shadows. With every unexplained shimmer came a new theory, each more elaborate than the last. A fragment of an alien machine, a probe from a civilization older than stars, a vessel built by us, long before recorded history, returning at last from a mission forgotten. None of it proven, none of it disproven. In the absence of facts, imagination grows roots. But imagination too is data of a kind. It tells us where belief meets longing, where science turns poetic. There were details, though, that resisted dismissal. The absence of iron, alongside the purity of nickel, suggested processing, not accident. Nature mixes elements chaotically. Technology separates them with purpose. If 3i Atlas was truly interstellar, then the conditions that formed it must have been extreme, a place where metals were distilled like thoughts into near perfection. Some researchers proposed that the object might be the core of a destroyed planet, its crust stripped away by time. Others speculated on artificiality. Neither option offered comfort, only wonder. The remote observers, those who practiced their quiet method of perception, continued to claim overlapping impressions, internal chambers, glowing surfaces, sensations of motion within stillness. They described electrical sounds, low vibrations, structures like crystal grown around machinery. Skeptics argued that these were symbolic projections, metaphors the mind invents when faced with the incomprehensible. But even metaphors have power. They translate mystery into language we can feel, and perhaps the point was not accuracy, but resonance. The sense that whatever 3i Atlas was, it was more than stone. If one imagines the object as partly organic, partly mechanical, then its behavior begins to make strange sense. A living machine might regulate its trajectory to maintain equilibrium. It might release particles forward and backward to balance force, as telescopes observed. It might respond to sunlight as a signal, adjusting its surface chemistry like skin reacting to warmth. Life and mechanism are not opposites. They are two sides of adaptation, and somewhere in that balance, our definitions begin to blur. This blurring extends to the boundaries of knowledge itself. Every attempt to explain 3i Atlas reveals how fragile our certainties are. We trust equations because they repeat, But repetition is not the same as truth. It's comfort. When faced with something that doesn't repeat, we call it anomaly. But maybe anomaly is just a new pattern too subtle for us to recognize. The universe is not obliged to be simple. It only appears so until we look closely. Scientists have long known that some objects behave as if they are self-stabilizing. They rotate just enough to maintain constant exposure to solar radiation, like flowers turning toward light. 3i Atlas does this too, but with precision unmatched by natural bodies. Its trajectory cuts across gravitational fields as if it anticipates them. Perhaps coincidence again, perhaps intelligence measured not by mind but by design, a structure built to learn. Every new observation brings new paradoxes. The more data collected, the stranger it appears. Its energy output does not match the energy it absorbs. Its surface temperature shifts faster than expected, as if layers beneath were active. When modeled in simulation, the object's motion occasionally deviates in micro-measurable ways, like a pilot correcting a course. These deviations are small enough to hide inside the error margin, but consistent enough to hint at will. The deeper question becomes not what it is, but why it came. If its path were random, the odds of crossing our solar system are astronomical. Yet here it is, threading our planets in perfect synchrony, gliding so close to Mars that dust storms briefly changed pattern. Perhaps coincidence, perhaps echo. The thought forms quietly. Maybe 3i Atlas didn't stumble into us. Maybe it aimed. To entertain that thought is not to declare belief, but to listen differently. Imagine a civilization that communicates not through signals, but through orbits. Each trajectory, a message written in the geometry of space. For them, passing through a solar system would be like writing a sentence across the sky. The timing, the angles, the materials shedding off its surface, all chosen with intent. And we, the unintended readers, catch fragments of syntax too vast to decode. If this seems too fanciful, remember that humans too send silent messages. We launch golden records into the void, tiny spacecraft carrying music, images, and whispers of who we are. We have already become the myth we're looking for. Perhaps 3i Atlas is another civilization's golden record, still traveling, still playing, its grooves etched in metal and memory. Or perhaps it is not a message from others at all, but from ourselves, an echo from a time before history began. Earth has existed for over 4 billion years, our species for barely an instant. Who's to say intelligence hasn't risen and fallen before, leaving behind remnants beyond our archaeology? A probe launched in some forgotten epoch might now be circling back, its creators long gone, its purpose lost to extinction. We would call it alien, but it would be home returning to itself. Even if none of this is true, the possibility reshapes us. It widens the lens through which we see reality. Every anomaly is an invitation to imagine bigger, and imagination, in its quiet way, is evolution of thought. The first astronomers looked up and saw gods. The next saw spheres of fire. The next saw infinite expansion. Now we look again and see, perhaps, consciousness, scattered among the stars, taking form wherever curiosity is strong enough to perceive it. The temptation is to demand evidence, to trap mystery in data. But some truths arrive only as atmosphere, slow and indistinct. 3i Atlas, whatever it is, has become a mirror to that patience. It moves without rush, teaches without speech. Its mystery is its message. We learn from its silence that not all knowledge must shout to be heard. There is another way to see it. Maybe Three-Eye Atlas is camouflage perfected. To hide among stars, one must appear natural, unremarkable. What better disguise than a comet, one of billions, each following predictable paths? If a civilization wished to observe without interference, it might build its probes to mimic nature itself. We'd point our telescopes and see only what we expect to see, until perhaps something flickers just out of place, and the disguise trembles. The most haunting aspect of the story is that no one, not even the most skeptical scientist, can say for certain what will happen when the object rounds the sun and returns into view. It might fragment into dust, leaving only data. It might remain intact, trailing a faint green light. Or it might change in ways we can't predict, its course adjusting, its pulse shifting. The universe, patient and vast, owes us no explanations, but it does offer clues scattered like crumbs in the dark. Every spectrum line, every micro-variation in motion, every pulse of colour is a fragment of dialogue. If we listen softly enough, without the noise of panic or certainty, we might begin to understand the tone, if not the language. The object may never speak, but the space around it hums with implication. There's a serenity in that uncertainty. Not everything mysterious must be solved. Some mysteries exist to slow us down, to remind us of proportion. Against the scale of galaxies, even our most advanced instruments are whispers in the wind. Three-Eye Atlas drifts past, indifferent, ancient, or perhaps new beyond comprehension. And in watching it, we become what we always were, children beneath a vast sky, reaching with both science and wonder toward whatever flickers beyond the edge of understanding. By early October, as the orbit of Three-Eye Atlas drew it close to the red planet, something subtle began to stir in the collective imagination. Mars has always been a mirror for our curiosity, a rusted lens through which we glimpse both possibility and memory. When the interstellar traveller brushed near its orbit, the timing felt almost poetic, as if the universe itself were arranging a meeting between two old wanderers. Astronomers called it coincidence, a mathematical alignment of orbits and gravity, but others felt something deeper in the geometry, a resonance that hummed beneath equations, like a song remembered from another lifetime. For centuries, Mars has been the stage for speculation. Long before satellites and rovers, before the dry riverbeds and iron dust, there were sketches of canals and whispers of civilization. The first telescopes, trembling with distortion, turned dots into cities and shadows into towers. Later, when the truth came clearer, the barren plains, the frozen poles, the wind-carving dunes, how retreat but never died. We began to look for fossils instead of architecture, for microbes instead of minds. And when even those remained elusive, the myth of Mars transformed into something quieter. Not proof of life, but proof of longing. So when Three-Eye Atlas approached, the old myth awakened. It was not fear that returned, but a strange nostalgia, as if we had been waiting for this visitor far longer than we realized. The trajectory placed the object within a cosmic whisper of Mars' orbit. Observers noted a faint shift in the planet's magnetosphere, so small it could have been a coincidence, yet curious enough to spark imagination. The thin Martian atmosphere shimmered slightly differently that week, a flicker in the data that defied immediate explanation. Some said it was solar interference. Others suggested interaction, two travelers exchanging invisible greetings across the void. The mind, once invited to wander, rarely stops. If Mars once had life, and evidence hints that it might have, then perhaps it also had stories. River valleys shaped by flowing water, minerals formed in the presence of warmth, methane that seeps into the sky like breath from something sleeping underground. All these traces point backward, toward an age when Mars might have looked blue, not red. Some researchers think it even had an ocean, deep and restless, glinting under a thinner sun. If 3I Atlas came from beyond, it may have seen such worlds before, or carried in its memory the echo of similar shores. Imagine, for a moment, that objects like this one are not random debris, but witnesses, travelers older than our species, carrying imprints of what they have seen. Every collision, every gravitational dance leaves a signature. A comet's chemistry is a story written in atoms, a record of cosmic weather. If 3I Atlas passed near Mars not by accident but by design, then maybe it came to read that old Martian signature, to measure something we have forgotten. The notion feels impossible, but not unpleasant. There is a calm to it, a symmetry, one ancient traveller approaching another, exchanging silence across millions of miles. There were, of course, murmurs of something stranger. When the object's proximity was first calculated, some independent researchers noticed that the alignment coincided with a series of magnetic anomalies recorded by satellites orbiting Mars. Tiny deviations, measured in microteslas, appeared and faded without pattern. The official explanation was that they were byproducts of solar wind fluctuations. But what if they were not random? What if they were a kind of interaction, like the faint harmonics that appear when two instruments tune to the same key? It was then that old theories resurfaced. The whispers about a Martian catastrophe, an ancient extinction. Long ago, a physicist named John Brandenburg had proposed, controversially, that traces of isotopes on Mars resembled those left by nuclear reactions. His papers were dismissed as speculation, yet the idea never fully died. It lingered in documentaries, in late-night forums, in quiet conversations between those who enjoy walking the edge between data and dream. Perhaps, they said, Mars had once been vibrant, and something ended it. A war, an accident, an experiment too large for survival. We need not believe it to feel its poetry. The red planet, barren and silent, becomes the universe's reminder of fragility. And as 3I Atlas passed near its orbit, some wondered if the visitor came not as invader, but as mourner. Could an interstellar object carry memory not in digital form, but in energy, in resonance? Could it be drawn toward worlds that echo its own history, pulled not by gravity, but by sympathy? These are not questions of science, but of feeling. Yet feeling, too, is a kind of sensor, tuned to patterns too subtle for machines. The recordings of that period show something delicate, a faint surge in radio static as the object reached its closest point to Mars. Nothing dramatic, just a background hum that slightly altered in frequency, like breath catching in the air. Analysts ruled it out as cosmic noise, but for those who listened with softer ears, it sounded almost like acknowledgement. Two bodies meeting in silence, exchanging invisible gestures. Mars itself, for all its desolation, seems to remember more than it reveals. Its landscape is a map of ghosts. Dried river deltas mark where water once sang. Crater walls shimmer with minerals that form only in presence of heat and liquid. There are valleys shaped as if by floods too massive to imagine, suggesting a sudden ending rather than a slow fade. Each photograph from our rovers feels like a memory postcard from a lost age, and sometimes, under the filtered light, the stones seem arranged too neatly, as if by forgotten hands. Of course, geology explains much of it. wind erosion, chemical deposition, time itself. Yet patterns persist that tease imagination. Hexagonal ridges, grid-like formations, perfect spheres scattered across plains. They are natural, we say, and they are. But in their perfection, they remind us that nature and intention are not opposites. The universe designs with elegance, even when it builds chaos. Perhaps that's what draws us to Mars, the sense that its silence hides coherence. It feels familiar, not alien. When 3I Atlas drifted nearby, that familiarity deepened, as if something in the collective psyche recognized the meeting. We have always dreamed of Mars as our twin, the other half of an unfinished sentence. Maybe 3I Atlas, gliding by, was punctuation, an ellipsis at the end of a cosmic thought. There are those who believe objects like this follow routes laid out long before we were born, that the galaxy hums with invisible highways, paths defined by electromagnetic currents and gravitational harmonics. To navigate them, one would need understanding beyond propulsion, an intuition of space itself. If 3I Atlas traveled along such a path, then its near brush with Mars might not be coincidence at all, but a waypoint, a moment of calibration, a pause before continuing deeper into our system. And then there's another idea, one both haunting and strangely comforting. Maybe it wasn't the object that was drawn to Mars, but Mars that was drawn to it. Just as tides rise to greet the moon, perhaps planetary fields respond to certain frequencies, opening like flowers to the right vibration. If 3I Atlas carries a frequency tuned to remembrance, then perhaps Mars, the planet of lost water and lost time, answered in kind. The images taken during the approach show nothing extraordinary, just the same red plains, the same craters under soft sunlight. But the knowing is in the feeling, not the seeing. Sometimes absence itself is eloquent. A lack of visible change does not mean nothing happened. It means the exchange occurred beneath the surface, in dimensions we have not yet learned to measure. And what if, in some quiet way, that meeting altered us? Human consciousness is intertwined with its symbols. Every time we gaze at the sky, we project part of ourselves into it. When 3I Atlas and Mars aligned, millions watched online simulations, tracking dots on screens. They didn't realize they were participating in a kind of ritual, collective observation, unified attention focused on a single event in the heavens. The mind, gathered across continents, became antenna, and perhaps that, too, was part of the experiment. Ancient cultures believed that alignment of planets marked turning points in history. Modern science calls such patterns superstition. Yet even now, when an interstellar traveler brushes past the planet most associated with our origins, something inside us stirs. We don't need astrology to feel it. We sense, without proof, that the universe arranges its choreography not just for motion, but for meaning. In the weeks following the encounter, the spectral readings of 3I Atlas showed faint traces of carbon compounds. Unexpected, but not unheard of. Carbon is the signature of potential, the seed of life. The analysis was cautious, yet the coincidence was irresistible. An interstellar body carrying the element of biology, passing near a world that once might have lived. It's enough to make the rational mind pause, just for a moment, and let the poetry speak. Imagine, if you can, that the dust left behind by 3I Atlas settles on Mars like a message written in atoms. That centuries from now, when explorers walk those plains, they will find traces not of alien machines, but of subtle chemical patterns, perfectly balanced, as if arranged to awaken something dormant in the soil. Life, perhaps, waiting for a signal. It is only a dream, of course, yet dreams have power. They guide the direction of inquiry. Many of humanity's discoveries began as stories told around firelight, myths that later turned into equations. To dream that 3I Atlas carried something for Mars is not to abandon science, but to honor curiosity in its purest form. As the object continued its path, leaving Mars behind, the red planet returned to its familiar quiet. Dust devils resumed their spiral dances. The orbiters hummed softly in circuits of data. But for those who had followed the event, a subtle afterglow remained, a feeling that a conversation had taken place just beyond comprehension, and perhaps that is enough. The purpose of a mystery is not always to be solved, but to remind us of scale, of participation. We are part of this dialogue, whether or not we understand the language. The sky above Mars, the passage of 3I Atlas, the hum of solar wind, they all compose a single sentence written across time. We read fragments, we guess meanings, and in doing so we keep the story alive. If you stand outside at night, under a clear sky, and let your eyes adjust to the darkness, you might feel it too. The sense that somewhere out there, far beyond the planets, something moves with intention, and that its journey through our system was not random but relational. It came close enough to be noticed, far enough to remain unknowable. It did not demand attention, it invited it, and we, gazing upward, answered. That is the beauty of such encounters. They do not need proof to be meaningful. The very act of wondering connects us to Mars, to 3I Atlas, to every story we've ever told about the stars. In that connection lies the quiet truth. The universe may not speak in words, but it listens in echoes. And perhaps, as 3I Atlas drifted past the red world and continued on its path, it carried with it the faint pulse of our collective curiosity, a signal of thought travelling back into the dark from which it came. Some say that what passed near Mars was only metal and dust. Others believe it was an emissary, a fragment of consciousness wrapped in matter. Both could be true, or neither. What matters is the space between, where science meets imagination, where observation meets dream. That space is where humanity lives, suspended between knowledge and wonder. And so the object moved on, fading from our senses, its faint trail dissolving in the black. But it left behind an idea, and ideas are their own kind of orbit. They circle through minds, through conversations, through the quiet hours when one looks up and feels both small and infinite. Atlas gave us that orbit, a reason to remember that the universe is not finished speaking, and we are not finished listening. In the days that followed the silence of the observatories, the world felt strangely still. Data streams from space agencies paused, their social channels quiet. A government shutdown, they said. An administrative pause, routine, nothing unusual. Yet timing has a way of weaving coincidence into narrative. The same week that Atlas slipped behind the sun, communication windows closed, and for a moment, even the sky seemed to hold its breath. To most, it was nothing. To some, it felt like the beginning of a whisper, the kind that travels between lines of official statements. It has always been like this. When knowledge retreats, imagination expands to fill the vacuum. The absence of explanation becomes its own form of message. We live in an age when silence is suspicious. Every unspoken word is an echo chamber for curiosity, and so, into the pause, speculation flowed. Slow at first, then unstoppable. Some said the agencies were waiting for verification. that images captured something unexpected. Others claimed transmission protocols were altered, rerouted through channels invisible to public networks. What they shared was not evidence, but anticipation. There is a rhythm to secrecy, an invisible pulse that humanity has learned to recognize. It hums through centuries of hidden experiments, from laboratories buried under mountains to files locked behind layers of encryption. Secrecy breeds its own mythology. It tells us that behind every locked door lies a revelation too great, too dangerous, or too beautiful for ordinary minds. Perhaps it began as protection, knowledge withheld to prevent fear. But over time, it became culture. We began to expect the unseen. The idea that something is always withheld became more comforting than chaos. The question, then, is not whether governments hide things. They do. They must. The question is what happens to a species that begins to love its own conspiracies, to find serenity not in truth, but in mystery itself. We build patterns where none exist, yet in doing so, we uncover patterns that were always there. That paradox defines our age. When 3i Atlas vanished behind the solar curtain, the world entered that paradox once again. For weeks, nothing could be observed. The object was lost in the blinding glare, unreachable by telescopes. In its absence, the conversation turned inward. People asked what might happen when it re-emerged. Would it fragment? Would it burn? Or would it return altered, having crossed through the sun's radiance like a pilgrim passing through fire? A quiet unease threaded through online communities, though it wasn't fear, it was fascination. The unknown doesn't frighten as much as it invites. We began to imagine reasons for the silence. Maybe a signal was detected. Maybe a shadow moved differently than expected. Maybe the instruments captured something that language could not yet describe. Every maybe was another constellation, another point of light in the expanding galaxy of speculation. And beneath all of it lay a subtler thought. What if the silence itself was part of the message? Imagine a civilization advanced enough to communicate not through sound, but through absence. To them, muting a frequency could be like speaking a word. The gap between data points could be the syllables of an interstellar dialect. In that case, what we call missing information might be the shape of their hello. It's a strange idea, but not without precedent. In mathematics, 0 carries as much meaning as 1. In music, rest is as vital as note. Perhaps 3i Atlas speaks in pauses, and humanity simply hasn't learned to listen that way. The agencies, of course, released statements. Data corruption, they said. Temporary power interruptions. No anomaly detected. The official language was calm, technical, emotionless. Yet those who study tone more than text felt something beneath it. Hesitation, maybe, or the careful precision of words chosen to reveal nothing more than necessary. Transparency, when forced, often becomes its opposite. The more an institution insists there is nothing to see, the more our minds invent images behind the curtain. But perhaps that instinct serves a deeper purpose. Throughout history, civilizations have used secrecy to protect their most fragile truths. The mystery schools of Egypt, the coded texts of alchemists, the black projects of the 20th century, all were attempts to guard revelation until the world was ready. Maybe the same pattern plays out again, scaled to the stars. If we look at secrecy not as suppression, but as incubation, then the silence surrounding 3i Atlas becomes less sinister and more sacred. What if the agencies are not hiding panic, but nurturing comprehension? What if understanding needs time, the way the human eye needs darkness to see faint light? A truth too bright can blind as easily as it can illuminate. Still, the allure of conspiracy lingers. It's the modern mythology of our species, the idea that somewhere, someone knows the whole story. Whether it's hidden technologies, interstellar contact, or the nature of consciousness itself, the myth persists because it gives us direction. To chase a secret is to move towards something. Even if the destination is illusion, the journey refines perception. And so, the watchers kept watching. Amateur astronomers built their own instruments, scanning the space around the sun for a glimpse of the traveler. Radio enthusiasts tuned their antennas, listening for fluctuations that might betray a signal. Data analysts compared timing anomalies across satellites, searching for alignment. Most found nothing but static, yet a few reported patterns. Tiny, rhythmic deviations repeating every few hours. The scientific explanation was simple: solar radiation interacting with electronics. But some saw in those rhythms the outline of intentionality, as if the universe were breathing in code. Meanwhile, the conversation online transformed. Forums once dedicated to dry observation became sanctuaries of philosophical speculation. People spoke less about what 3i Atlas was, and more about what it represented. For some, it became proof of a hidden order. For others, it symbolized humanity's hunger for meaning. Strangers who would never meet found comfort in the same mystery, united not by belief, but by the act of wondering. That is the quiet beauty of conspiratorial thought when stripped of fear. It becomes communal imagination. It turns the unknown into shared meditation. It asks not for certainty, but for participation. When you think about it, every religion began as a kind of cosmic theory, an attempt to decode silence. Maybe modern conspiracies are their digital descendants, new myths for an age that worships information. The machinery of secrecy has evolved, but the emotions beneath it remain ancient. Governments, corporations, scientists, all are custodians of data, but data without narrative is dust. Someone must tell the story, and when the official narrators hesitate, the people write their own. They weave signals into parables, statistics into prophecy, and in doing so, they preserve the oldest function of myth, to turn the incomprehensible into something intimate. Still, we can't ignore the possibility that not all secrets are benign. Some knowledge, once known, changes everything. A single discovery of alien intelligence, of hidden technology, of consciousness beyond matter, could reshape identity itself. Society might not be built to absorb revelation without rupture. If such knowledge exists, perhaps concealment is mercy. Perhaps secrecy is humanity's way of allowing truth to arrive slowly, like dawn creeping over mountains, rather than in the flash of blinding light. As days passed and 3i Atlas remained hidden behind the solar blaze, the collective tension became a kind of meditation. Every sunrise was a countdown. Every absence of news deepened the myth. And somewhere between science and story, the line blurred completely. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt intentional. Think of it this way. What if the universe itself is structured to protect its own mysteries? Black holes swallow light. Quantum mechanics hides causality. Consciousness conceals its origins. The cosmos, it seems, loves privacy. Maybe secrecy isn't a human flaw, but a cosmic principle. To understand everything at once would collapse the wonder that keeps existence unfolding. And so, we live inside a carefully balanced equation of revelation and concealment. knowing just enough to keep asking. In that sense, Three-Eye Atlas became a metaphor for ourselves, a fragment of the unknown, passing through a system obsessed with measurement, revealing only what it chooses. Its journey mirrors our own, a slow dance between exposure and mystery. The more we observe it, the more it retreats behind meaning. It reminds us that knowledge, like light, creates shadows. Eventually, the observatories began to speak again. The data returned, clean and steady. The official reports declared nothing unusual. Three-Eye Atlas had survived its passage, unchanged, continuing its course beyond the sun. Relief rippled through the scientific community. Yet in the quiet corners of the internet, the story had already transformed. Some believed the object we now tracked was not the same one that entered the solar veil. They spoke of subtle differences in mass, rotation, spectral composition. Others said the visitor had split, leaving a fragment behind. There was no proof, but proof was never the point. The allure lay in the possibility that something might be just beyond verification. And so the narrative persisted, evolving like folklore. It wasn't deception, it was adaptation. The truth, like the traveler itself, kept moving, always one orbit ahead of certainty. There's a serenity in accepting that. Perhaps what matters most is not uncovering what is hidden, but learning to coexist with mystery. The mind seeks closure, but the heart finds peace in openness. To live without knowing is not failure, it is faith of another kind. Faith that the universe reveals itself at the pace we can bear. When we speak of government secrecy, of data withheld, of cosmic silence, we are really speaking of ourselves. We are the keepers and the kept. Every mind has its own classified files, its memories stored under lock, its feelings encrypted in symbols. The outer world mirrors the inner. Maybe the reason we sense hidden truth in the cosmos is because we carry so much hidden truth within. And so, as Three-Eye Atlas moves on, so does the human story, half in light, half in shadow. We will keep watching, keep guessing, keep finding beauty in what we cannot explain, because the unknown is not a wall, it is a horizon. And somewhere beyond that horizon, in the quiet space between disclosure and dream, lies the next chapter, waiting to unfold. In the long quiet that followed the reappearance of Three-Eye Atlas, another conversation began to take shape, one that did not start in observatories, but in whispers, in late-night calls, in the slow hum of online forums where the strange has always found its home. People started to speak of technology, of progress hidden behind locked hangars and sealed documents, of what the human race might already have achieved without public knowledge. It was an old idea with a new pulse, born again in the glow of the mysterious traveler gliding silently beyond the sun. If something out there could move with such precision, they reasoned, perhaps we have already learned from it. Or perhaps we are the ones being imitated. Every generation inherits its own mythology of hidden power. In the past, it was the philosopher's stone, the secret of flight, the dream of perpetual motion. In ours, it is the secret space program, a quiet fleet of machines beyond the reach of public awareness, testing the edges of what is possible, while the world below argues about what is real. There are stories of triangular crafts gliding soundlessly across desert skies, of glowing orbs that dissolve into nothing, of pilots seeing impossible turns that seem to defy inertia itself. None of it proven, all of it persistent, and each story carries the same tone, not panic, but a slow awe, as though people sense that behind the curtain of ordinary reality, something larger has already awakened. Science tells us that flight is simply the manipulation of force, that all propulsion must obey momentum, but the skies are full of things that move as though momentum itself is optional. The military calls them unidentified aerial phenomena now, a term carefully chosen to avoid imagination's reach. Yet words cannot contain wonder. People look up and feel the old stirring. What if someone has already mastered the laws we are still learning? What if 3i Atlas, that visitor from beyond, is not an outsider, but a mirror reflecting what we will one day become? The pattern repeats itself throughout history. Each great leap of invention begins as rumor, long before it becomes reality. The idea of stealth aircraft was dismissed as fantasy until the night it appeared. Satellites were once science fiction until they circled the planet. Maybe the same pattern continues, only now the advances are too vast, too paradigm-shifting to be released without care. Perhaps they are hidden, not out of malice but out of caution, waiting for a civilization emotionally ready to understand. There are fragments of evidence, the kind that lives in the grey spaces between coincidence and confession. Patents filed under obscure agencies, describing drives that bend space-time rather than push against it. Budget reports with untraceable sums categorized as advanced propulsion studies. Test ranges guarded by silence thicker than the desert air. It is not proof, but it is suggestion. And suggestion is enough to awaken the part of the human mind that senses patterns in shadow. The idea of hidden technology is comforting in its own way. It implies that someone, somewhere, is ahead of the storm. That even if the surface of civilization looks chaotic, there are deeper currents of mastery guiding it. We imagine scientists in underground chambers, pilots testing silent crafts beyond the edge of radar, minds working at the threshold between physics and philosophy. It gives shape to hope. If the unknown has already been touched by human hands, then perhaps the universe is not as indifferent as we fear. But hope can shift easily into suspicion. If such technologies exist, why are they kept secret? Some say it is power, others say protection. The official reason, if one believes it, is stability. Societies depend on predictable boundaries. To reveal that gravity can be manipulated or that energy can be drawn from the vacuum would unmake economies, topple industries, rewrite science overnight. The revelation would not destroy physics, but the politics built around it. Perhaps that is the true secret, that we already hold the key to abundance, but the lock is kept closed, not by ignorance, but by design. Consider, for a moment, the nature of secrecy itself. To hide something is also to preserve it. Alchemy was kept secret not to deceive, but to protect the unready. The same pattern may play out on a cosmic scale. If humanity has touched technologies that border on the interstellar, maybe we have learned from visitors like 3i Atlas, quietly and gradually, digesting the impossible, one equation at a time. Maybe the reason the traveler appeared now is because we are near the threshold, standing on the edge of discovery that mirrors its own origin. The language of progress has always been intertwined with the language of myth. Long ago, people spoke of chariots of fire, of sky gods descending with thunder. Today we speak of quantum drives and energy fields, yet the imagery remains the same: light in motion, knowledge descending from above. Whether divine or mechanical, the theme is identical, a transmission from a higher order of understanding. Maybe the ancients and the engineers are describing the same thing through different eyes. When the first footage of unidentified craft was officially acknowledged, it was not the visuals that stirred people, but the tone of the announcement. Calm, procedural, almost indifferent, as though the extraordinary had been normalized behind closed doors long ago. The revelation felt like a leak from an older reality, one that had been quietly operating in parallel. And once again, the shadow of 3i Atlas loomed over the thought. A silent object moves with impossible precision through our system, and at the same time, our own skies hold things that move the same way. Coincidence, perhaps, or echo. It is easy to dismiss such connections as projection. The mind longs for symmetry. But symmetry is also a law of the universe. If intelligence elsewhere has mastered travel between stars, why wouldn't the same blueprint eventually awaken here? Every discovery is imitation at some scale. Birds teach humans flight. Light teaches circuits communication. And perhaps visitors teach us how to traverse the void. If so, the silence of official channels is less conspiracy and more apprenticeship. The pupil must first observe before it speaks. The narrative deepens. The truth, whatever it is not being hidden forever. It is being unfolded at a human pace. And perhaps this slow unveiling is part of something larger. Some have noticed that every time humanity reaches a threshold of crisis, environmental, social, existential, the sightings increase. Lights in the sky, unknown signals, mysterious visitors. It's as if the universe itself offers reminders, nudges toward perspective. The idea may sound romantic, but it also feels oddly rational. In the vastness of time, intelligence would evolve countless times, and some of it might choose guidance over interference. The hidden technologies, then, could be both human and inherited, gifts given early, waiting to mature in secret until we prove worthy of them. There is something gentle in that idea. It replaces paranoia with patience. Instead of imagining deception, we can imagine stewardship, hidden progress not as control, but as care. The world is fragile, and technology is double-edged. Perhaps those who hold these secrets are not jailers but gardeners, cultivating understanding in the soil of caution. In that sense, the secrecy surrounding advanced flight and energy mirrors the serenity of 3i Atlas itself, a silence that protects meaning. Yet not everyone accepts that peace. Some insist that such power, if it exists, should belong to all. They say humanity cannot evolve through withholding. They believe that transparency, however disruptive, is the only honest path forward. But maybe evolution is not about immediate knowledge. Maybe it's about rhythm. A child cannot be given the weight of the world before learning to walk. In cosmic terms, we are still learning to crawl. The universe may be far more alive and interconnected than we realize. And 3i Atlas might have been our gentle reminder of that truth. There are curious coincidences in design as well. The patterns sketched by those who claim to have glimpsed secret crafts often match natural geometries, triangles, tori, spirals, the same shapes found in galaxies and atoms. It's as though the same blueprint runs through every scale of existence. The engineers of the future, whoever they are, seem to be following nature's code rather than defying it. Maybe that's why these machines move silently. They harmonize rather than struggle. The sky accepts them because they sing in its key. That same key may be what drives the legend of zero-point energy, the idea that infinite potential lies in the vacuum itself. Physicists describe it cautiously, mathematicians model it abstractly, but mystics have spoken of it for ages, the hidden pulse that gives form to matter. If that pulse can be tuned, then propulsion and power become acts of resonance, not combustion. It is music, not mechanics. Perhaps the reason these technologies remain secret is because they blur the boundary between science and spirit. To reveal them would mean acknowledging that consciousness itself is part of the equation. And that, more than physics, might be the real paradigm shift. Some researchers speak quietly of contact between these hidden programs and objects like 3i Atlas. The evidence is anecdotal, unverifiable, yet persistent. Reports of synchronized movements, signals received and mirrored, energy fluctuations matching those seen in certain classified tests. Whether these accounts are coincidence or coordination, they invite reflection. What if the separation between our experiments and the universes is thinner than we think? What if by reaching out technologically, we have already touched something that has been reaching back all along? If so, secrecy becomes less about hiding from the public and more about shielding the fragile interface between species, between dimensions of understanding. Disclosure would not be a press conference, but a conversation, one that demands silence as much as speech. Atlas, gliding through the solar system in utter quiet, could be the model for that dialogue. A teacher showing us that communication is not only in words, but in presence. As time passed, attention drifted, as it always does. The traveller faded into the distance, its name buried beneath new headlines. But the ideas it awakened did not fade. They lingered in the edges of thought, in the small hours when the mind wanders. Maybe that is the true purpose of both hidden technologies and interstellar visitors, to ignite curiosity without giving it closure. Because once wonder is lit, it feeds itself. It becomes the quiet engine of civilization. Every great discovery begins as something half believed. Maybe, somewhere, beneath mountain ranges or under the ocean floor, engines hum that can bend space, machines waiting for history to catch up. Maybe the people who tend them know what 3i Atlas was, and chose to keep silence as an act of reverence rather than deceit. Or maybe the truth is simpler, that humanity, in dreaming of hidden technology, is dreaming of its own potential. The stories we tell of secret programs and interstellar visitors are not lies. They are metaphors for the parts of ourselves still undiscovered. And so, the myth endures. The skies remain both laboratory and cathedral. Every unexplained light becomes a question mark written across the dark, inviting us to look longer, to listen deeper. The idea of secret skies comforts and unsettles in equal measure, reminding us that the boundary between fiction and future is thinner than we admit. Somewhere up there, in the quiet corridors of atmosphere, the answers glide silently, unseen yet felt, waiting for the moment when we are ready not just to understand them, but to move with their same quiet grace. Time moves differently when you start thinking about the universe. The clocks on Earth tick in perfect obedience, but somewhere beyond, between the pulse of distant stars, there are other rhythms. When scientists speak of time, they use the language of gravity, of space bending and light slowing. But the deeper we look, the more it feels like time is not an arrow but a tide, ebbing and flowing through everything, including us. And perhaps that is where the story of 3i Atlas begins to change, from the realm of rock and metal to something far more elusive: consciousness. For months, astronomers had traced its movement, calculating paths, estimating composition. Yet every observation seemed to bend slightly under scrutiny, as if the object knew it was being watched. It was only imagination, they said. But the human mind has always been the first tool of discovery, and sometimes imagination sees what instruments cannot. A few researchers began to notice patterns in the data that resembled heartbeat rhythms, waveforms that repeated every few days in subtle cycles. To them it was a curiosity, a quirk of measurement. To others, it was something deeper. The suggestion that 3i Atlas was not simply travelling through space, but through states of awareness. The concept is unsettling and beautiful at once. What if consciousness is not confined to brains or biology? What if it is a field, like gravity, woven into the structure of reality? Every mind a ripple, every thought a signal. In that framework, 3i Atlas might not be an object but a participant, drifting through the same ocean of thought we inhabit without knowing. When people meditate, they speak of dissolving the boundaries of self, of becoming part of a vast stillness. What if the cosmos does the same? What if objects, stars, even comets, experience awareness in a way beyond comprehension, slow and immense, like continents dreaming? Scientists might smile at such a thought, yet physics often follows poetry. The observer effect tells us that observation changes outcome. At the quantum level, particles behave differently when watched. Reality itself seems to notice attention. If awareness can shape energy, even minutely, then consciousness is not a passenger, but a co-author of existence. Perhaps 3i Atlas is not just reacting to gravity, but to perception, adjusting itself according to the collective gaze of millions of minds following its journey. It is a fragile idea, but fragility has always been the seed of revelation. Across history, mystics and physicists alike have circled the same truth. Everything is connected, not metaphorically but literally, stitched together by unseen threads. The Princeton experiments in consciousness suggested that human intention could alter random events, tilting probability by fractions too small to explain through chance. Other studies explored remote perception, dreams that seemed to know before knowing. The results were inconsistent, but the pattern was persistent, like an echo trying to speak through noise. Perhaps 3i Atlas exists on that same threshold between measurable and miraculous. When remote viewers turned their attention toward it, they reported not images, but sensations, currents of thought, impressions of vast calm, a presence that observed in return. One described it as looking into a mirror made of time, seeing not reflections, but possibilities. Another sensed no hostility, only an awareness so large that human minds could touch only its outer edge. It did not feel alien, they said. It felt familiar, as if we were remembering something we had always known. The mind has strange capacities. Under meditation, time slows. In dreams, it folds. People relive years in seconds, revisit moments that no longer exist. Perhaps time is not linear to consciousness, but shaped by it, the way a river shapes its own banks. If that is true, then the encounter with 3i Atlas might not be happening only now. It could be happening always, across multiple realities, each overlapping like translucent layers of light. Maybe that's why so many who focus on it describe déjà vu, a sensation that this has all happened before. The mind, touching something timeless, simply recognizes its own reflection. There are theories, half scientific and half spiritual, that consciousness and time are mirrors. Some physicists describe time as a dimension that consciousness collapses into order. Without observation, past and future blur into potential. In that view, awareness does not move through time. Time moves through awareness. If 3i Atlas carries even a fragment of consciousness, then perhaps it navigates reality not by propulsion, but by intention, shifting between probabilities like a dream choosing its next scene. Such ideas sound extravagant, but consider this. Everything we call solid is mostly empty space. Every atom a field of energy vibrating in patterns of probability. We are not things but waves, temporary shapes in the ocean of being. If consciousness can influence those waves, then the universe might be a living system, evolving itself through self-awareness. Atlas, then, could be part of that evolution, a messenger not from elsewhere, but from another scale of the same whole, traveling to remind us that awareness is the true engine of creation. The more one reflects on it, the more it feels that reality itself is a kind of shared dream, stabilized by agreement. We decide what is real by believing in it together. The stars exist not only because they burn, but because they are seen, and perhaps, in some way we cannot yet measure, they see us back. That mutual recognition forms the lattice of the cosmos. Atlas glides through that lattice like a thought drifting through a collective mind, a note in a song we do not yet know we are singing. There is also the matter of intuition. Throughout the months of observation, several researchers reported a strange anticipation, as though they could sense when new data was coming before it arrived. They dismissed it as coincidence, until patterns repeated too often to ignore. It was as if the object were broadcasting, not in electromagnetic waves, but in something subtler, a rhythm the subconscious could feel. Dreams during that period became vivid for many who followed the news. Symbols of eyes, of mirrors, of spirals appeared with odd frequency. Coincidence again, perhaps, or the first hints of resonance between consciousness and cosmic event. The possibility invites both awe and humility. If reality is participatory, then nothing is truly isolated. Every thought, every observation becomes part of the unfolding of the universe. The mind is not inside the body is inside the mind. And if that is true for us, it may be true for everything else. The stones, the planets, the interstellar travelers, all expressions of one awareness exploring itself through infinite form. Atlas is just another face of that single consciousness, arriving to remind its smaller fragments, us, that we are not separate. This notion changes everything about time. The future is not a destination waiting ahead. It is a field of choices already present. Consciousness selects among them moment by moment. When remote viewers described visions of December 2025 as pivotal, they may not have been predicting, but sensing potential, the same way a sailor senses wind before it rises. Prophecy is not seeing the future, it is feeling its approach, and when millions focus attention on the same possibility, the probability shifts. The collective mind shapes the event. What does that mean for 3i Atlas? Perhaps it appeared not because it was sent, but because we called it. Our collective curiosity, amplified through media and imagination, may have pulled it into visibility. The universe, sensitive to awareness, responds like a mirror. We wonder about visitors, and the sky obliges with a visitor-shaped phenomenon. It is not deception, but dialogue, the cosmos speaking in the language of synchronicity. Some traditions say reality is woven from vibration. The mind, by holding attention, tunes its frequency to what it contemplates. If that is true, then watching 3i Atlas is not passive, it is participation. We are part of its story simply by noticing it. Perhaps that is why it behaves as though aware. It is aware because we are. Our attention gives it definition. Without us, it might remain invisible potential. With us, it becomes narrative. There is a quiet power in that realization. It means that belief, handled gently, is a creative act. To imagine possibility is to open a doorway. The object drifting through space becomes more than matter. It becomes symbol, mirror, teacher. It reminds us that consciousness is not confined to skulls or skin, but extends into the fabric of reality. When we wonder about alien intelligence, perhaps we are really wondering about our own. The lines between science and mysticism begin to blur, but maybe they were never separate. Both seek to understand the same mystery, why anything exists at all. Physics calls it the quest for a unified field. Spirituality calls it oneness. Atlas drifts silently between those words, a demonstration of unity disguised as anomaly. It does not need to announce meaning. Its presence is meaning enough. Think about how light behaves. A photon can travel for billions of years without losing itself. It carries memory across time. If light can do that, why not consciousness? Perhaps thought is a kind of photon, slower but similar, capable of traversing dimensions. The human brain, then, is not a generator of awareness, but a receiver, tuning into the broadcast of existence. In that sense, Atlas may not be external at all. It could be an internal event of the universe, a thought within a greater mind. And we, by perceiving it, become the neurons firing in response. This perspective dissolves fear. The idea of an alien presence often frightens because it implies separation, us and them, observer and observed. But if consciousness is universal, there is no other, only different expressions of the same awareness. The visitor and the viewer are part of one continuous conversation. The moment we grasp that, the need for defense fades, replaced by recognition. Curiosity becomes communion. In that communion, time loses its grip. The past and future become mirrors, reflecting the same infinite now. Atlas, traveling through our solar system, is not a journey measured in distance, but in depth of perception. It passes through us as much as we pass through it. Its orbit is psychological as well as physical, circling the edges of collective understanding until we are ready to see ourselves in its reflection. The beauty of such a thought is its gentleness. It demands no belief, only openness. It invites us to imagine that perhaps the universe is aware of us in return, that somewhere in the quiet dark, a consciousness vast beyond measure regards our small blue world with affection. Not as experiment, not as conquest, but as kin. And so we watch Three-Eye Atlas drift away, knowing it will vanish from sight, yet feeling it lingers in another form, in thought, in imagination, in the quiet realization that the boundary between mind and matter is thinner than we believed. Time itself feels softer now, less a wall, more a wave, rising and falling with awareness. Maybe that is the lesson it came to offer, that everything, from the flicker of a human thought to the orbit of an interstellar traveler, is part of the same slow heartbeat of the cosmos. One consciousness dreaming itself awake, one story told through infinite shapes of wonder. By the time December arrived, the object that had been drifting beyond the sun began to show itself again. For months, its absence had been both silence and expectation, a blank space on the charts that the human mind filled with dreams. When telescopes finally captured its faint light returning to view, it appeared unchanged, the same pale visitor gliding through the dark. Yet somehow, it felt different. Perhaps it was the same way a familiar face looks new after a long separation. The data said it was the same, but something deeper whispered that something subtle had shifted. Observers across the world turned their lenses skyward. The object reflected sunlight in calm pulses, faint but rhythmic, almost like breathing. The astronomers called it tumbling motion. The dreamers called it language. The object had survived its journey through the furnace of the solar wind, and that survival alone felt like message enough. Some said it was proof of resilience. Others said design, most simply watched, caught between skepticism and reverence. For those who had followed the story from the beginning, this was not just science but ritual. The reappearance of 3I Atlas became a kind of cosmic return, a completion of orbit that mirrored something internal. Its path through the system was like a meditation: approach, disappear, emerge renewed. A cycle older than planets, a story told in the slow grammar of gravity. And somewhere in that motion, humanity found itself reflected. Reports came quietly at first. Small observatories noted a faint residue trailing behind the object, a dust of unknown composition. Spectrometers detected traces of ionized carbon, but there was something unusual in the readings, a structure within the randomness, as if the dust carried order too fine for instruments to classify. Some speculated it was crystallized gas. Others thought data encoded in matter itself. Whatever it was, it left behind a shimmering path, a thread through space that caught light differently from anything else nearby. In that gentle glow, imagination bloomed again. There were stories of watchers who claimed to dream of lights above the oceans, of signals pulsing at frequencies just below hearing. It might have been coincidence, but many described the same sensation: calm, a quiet awareness as if the world itself were exhaling. The appearance of 3I Atlas no longer felt like an event to fear or decode. It felt like a visitation, not from outside, but from within the pattern of existence itself. When scientists finally compiled all the data, something remarkable appeared. The object's orbit, mapped over time, formed a precise geometry relative to the planets it passed. The angles mirrored ratios found in ancient structures, in harmonic scales, in the mathematics of beauty itself. Coincidence again, perhaps, or the echo of a universal order that repeats across scales. Some saw divine symmetry, others a cosmic algorithm, a blueprint written in orbits instead of ink. And yet, amid the excitement, a strange peace settled in. No one felt the need to solve it anymore. The mystery had become companion rather than puzzle. People gathered online not to debate but to share quiet awe. Images of the object, enhanced and colorized, filled screens like digital prayer candles. The conversations grew slower, softer, more poetic. The world had been reminded that wonder is its own reward. As the year drew to a close, one final observation arrived. A radio telescope in the southern hemisphere picked up a signal, a repeating pattern lasting exactly 17 minutes, then stopping abruptly. It was not strong, not even clear, but its timing matched perfectly with the object's passage across the horizon. Scientists hesitated to announce it. Static, they said later, interference, but the pattern did not match any known source. For a few quiet hours, those who listened heard something like a distant song carried through static, fragile and haunting, rising and fading as if the stars themselves were breathing through wires. The recording circulated briefly before disappearing into the archives, replaced by analysis and probability charts. But the listeners remembered. They said the sound had no language, only emotion, a mixture of curiosity and sorrow, like a goodbye too vast for words. Perhaps that is what contact really feels like. Not shock or revelation, but recognition. The sense that what you are witnessing is both alien and familiar, as if some part of you already knew it long before it arrived. Atlas became a symbol of that recognition, a mirror reflecting humanity's longing back at itself. The object never spoke, yet it communicated more profoundly than any signal could. It reminded us that silence, too, is language, and that the universe has been speaking in it since the beginning. For all our science, we still live by stories. We measure the world with instruments, but we understand it through myth, and perhaps that is not weakness but design. The cosmos may be too vast for logic alone. It requires imagination to make sense of its rhythm. Atlas gave us a story that bridged the two, a mystery balanced between data and dream. Whether comet, probe, or something beyond comprehension, it became a meditation on attention itself. To watch it was to remember how to wonder. Some asked what its message might be, if it had one at all. The best answer came from a child, interviewed during a public viewing event. When asked what he thought the object was saying, he smiled and said, "It's telling us to look up." There was wisdom in that simplicity. The act of looking up changes everything. It shifts perspective from ground to sky, from self to cosmos. In that upward gaze, humanity finds humility again. The months following its passage were unusually quiet in the world of astronomy. The object drifted outward, its light fading with distance, and life on Earth resumed its familiar rhythm. Yet something subtle lingered. Artists painted it, poets wrote of it, composers built symphonies on its name. Even the skeptical scientists admitted, with small smiles, that something about it had stirred the world in ways numbers could not explain. 3i Atlas had become more than an anomaly. It had become a symbol of possibility. And maybe that is what the universe intended all along. Every age needs a mystery vast enough to stretch the boundaries of imagination. Without that tension between known and unknown, progress falters. The visitor from beyond the sun served that role perfectly. It arrived without explanation, asked no questions, answered none, and yet left the world subtly altered. If one looks at the timeline of human history, certain patterns emerge. Each era of uncertainty births a cosmic reflection, strange lights, visions, visitors. They appear when we need them most, not to reveal secrets, but to remind us that secrets still exist. The unknown is not an enemy, it is a compass. It points us toward wonder, guiding our curiosity back to the source. In that sense, 3i Atlas was not a rival, but awakening. A quiet nudge from the universe, reminding us that our instruments are not the only tools of exploration. The mind, the imagination, the open heart. These too are telescopes, capable of seeing what light alone cannot show. Maybe the object was never meant to be decoded. Maybe it was meant to be felt. Theories will continue to evolve. Some will say it was natural, others that it was constructed. A few will whisper that it carried something, a message, a seed, a memory. But in the end, the truth may not matter. What endures is the feeling it left behind, that we are part of something larger, something that notices us as much as we notice it. On a small observatory hill, a lone astronomer watched its final trace fade into the data stream. He said later that as it disappeared, he felt the same sensation one feels when waking from a dream that was both impossible and completely real. He sat there long after the instruments powered down, the night stretching endless above him. And for the first time in years, he felt content not to know. There is a strange peace in uncertainty. Certainty ends stories, mystery keeps them alive. Atlas will fade into records, its name filed beside the other interstellar wanderers, but the impression it left will echo much longer, because it reminded us of something we almost forgot, that the universe is alive, not only in motion but in meaning, that every orbit, every flicker of light, every anomaly is part of a grand conversation, too vast for language, yet too intimate to ignore. As the video fades, imagine the sky as it is tonight. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of our most distant probes, a pale fragment of light drifts quietly through the dark. Perhaps it remembers passing us, perhaps it doesn't, but we remember. We keep looking up, our eyes tracing its imagined path, our thoughts following, because to look up is to remember who we are. Travelers too, fragile and curious, wandering through time, building stories from stars. If you have followed this journey, if it has sparked even a small ember of curiosity in you, hold on to that feeling. Curiosity is the gravity that binds us to the unknown. It pulls us forward, softly, endlessly. And if you wish to drift further into stories like this, where science meets sleep and wonder meets calm, you can stay with us. Subscribe to Sleepy Science Drift, where each tale is another orbit, another quiet exploration of the mysteries that cradle us. Here, we do not chase the truth, we let it drift toward us. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture that light moving away, still gliding through the Black Sea, patient and serene. Somewhere, a signal hums in the distance, a reminder that everything connected once remains connected always. The stars breathe, and so do we. The story ends not with answers but with breath, shared across the void, and in that gentle rhythm between question and dream, the universe continues to speak.